So, hello and good afternoon. I welcome you to today's hot topic webinar, investing in the digitalization, respectively in the digitalization economy. I'm sorry. It will be easier to directly name the company we will talk about here today, about Nvidia, in fact. And there's there has been some buzz, let's call it. And there has been some news which came across the ticker for several reasons, or especially for one reason, because there is an acquisition taking place right now with Arm Limited, and who that is, especially also who is Nvidia, and also in addition to that, who is Arm, and why is the acquisition of Arm such a big deal, in fact. And it's probably the leader for Nvidia to probably become the next 1 trillion US dollar company in terms of market capitalization. This is exactly what we want to focus on today here. So first of all, there's one important aspect I'd like to point out here, because you probably will be a little irritated why you read now Admirals here. Admirals sees currently a so-called rebranding. So on the eve of our 20th anniversary, as you can read here, Admiral Markets will be rebranding to Admirals. As we venture into a new era, we will expand the product offering in this context, and the commitment to you, however, remains unchanged. And so everything else can be visited on the website. Then, in terms of this, if you have further questions about this rebranding process, feel free to reach out to Admiral directly and ask there your sales representative, in this case, or account manager, whoever you have there. And this is just for information purposes at this point. Here is a new slide also about Admiral Markets in this context. Very important to note, as we already pointed out several times in the past, and we'll point out here again, Admirals is probably one of the most competitive brokers in the FX and CFD universe here, with over 8,000 financial products being offered, an expert in the CFD environment especially. So here in Germany, for example, where I'm located, Admiral Markets is considered the so-called DAX expert, with the probably most competitive offering you will find in the FX industry in this context. And also in the CFD industry, not FX in case of the DAX, but and this is especially noteworthy. When I partnered with Admiral Markets several years ago, I considered Admiral to be the DAX expert and wasn't really aware of their FX offering, in fact, and then found out quite soon after that they have also a very competitive offering when it comes to FX trading, with very tight spreads. In fact, I've never seen a broker who has similar tight spreads. Probably sometimes from time to time have similar tight spreads, but Admiral Markets has a very competitive offering here. The information I received here on an external website, by the way, so it wasn't Admiral Admiral Markets in this case who told me that, but I found it out myself by just checking out an external source here in terms of spread comparison. And beside of that, as just what I want to let you know and motivate you to do is check out admiralmarkets.com. And for further informations here, respectively, admirals.com in this context, then, and you get you get all the information which are necessary to know in this context if you're interested. And now what we want to do is we want to shine a light on today's agenda first, and then we'll go through each aspect. So first of all, I want to answer the question, who's NVIDIA? Some of you probably know NVIDIA. What's probably interesting is that NVIDIA is part of my technological life already for over 20 years. So the company, as we will see, was founded in 1993. And when I got my first personal computer back in the 90s, at the end of the 90s, that was even before the big bubble which burst then in the early 2000s, the new economy which built, and the internet bubble which occurred. NVIDIA was already a big player back then, and we were comparing our the German word is Grafikkarte, so the graphic card. I think this is the English expression for that. We were comparing if you, or how fast and how great your processor and your graphics are, and then NVIDIA was already a big player back then, and you were on top of the, or head of the pack, let's say, if you had an Nvidia graphic card in your computer. And so I know Nvidia for several, nearly 2 decades now, and the company has grown even further and increased their overall business for and over several aspects of the technological landscape. And I have to say that I consider Nvidia solely for its developments over the last years and decades as a very, very competitive company in general in the tech space. And I think it's no coincidence that Nvidia is also part of the so-called Fangman group. We can, or we refer to Fangman as Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, Apple, and then also Nvidia in this context. And all companies together, 7 companies here in the tech space, they have over 7.5 trillion USD market cap. So just for comparison reasons, the overall GDP of Germany and Italy together, I think in 2019 was slightly above 6 trillion USD. So that was the GDP. And those 7 companies I just mentioned here have a market cap of over 7.5 trillion. So just to see how big tech here is, and Nvidia is part of that group here in this context. And Nvidia is about to grow. And there's now this 40 billion Arm acquisition. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest acquisition in the tech space here ever, if it goes through from a legal perspective. So you can already see there's some competitors who already stand up and say, oh, no, we don't want Nvidia to acquire Arm here. Because this makes Nvidia a real giant, as a big player in this space, and it's already a big player. So probably leaving it with so much influence in this space that Nvidia can easily overtake all the other companies. And this is already showing you why this current topic is so hot and why it's definitely worth to shine a light on that. And so in this context, we definitely have to give also the semiconductor industry an overview here. And then at the end, I mean, certainly all this is very interesting, no question about that. But what we want to also point out here in the upcoming minutes then at the end of this webinar is how to invest in the semiconductor industry. In this case, by directly buying Nvidia, and what levels I currently watch. So currently we see an accumulation, I think we can call this, which is taking place. And you can already spot this in the chart. We have seen a short push and fake out potentially on the upside from a technical standpoint here. But probably after some further months, which we'll go through, probably a deeper corrective move, which would be very, very handsome given the increased and more attractive risk-reward ratio in this context. And what we want to do is then formulate a trading setup, which can be directly traded by trading Nvidia. In this case, with the hashtag, it's also CFD. So if you're not convinced of what I currently present here, and you say, well, I don't think that Nvidia is about to go straight up, but in fact, I think that Nvidia has a chance of a sharp decline, then you have also the chance to trade Nvidia from a short side via the CFD here. And also what we want to do is, it's all, I mean, you put all baskets in one egg, all eggs in one basket. So to build a broader portfolio here, there's also several other opportunities, for example, by buying ETFs in this context or investing in ETFs long term. And the semiconductor industry, there's an ETF which is short here. It's SOXX. You can trade it via this ticker symbol here via Admiral Markets in this case. So this is also what we want to shine a light on and show how big Nvidia is already in the space, but there's certainly also competition. And so what we have here is a first screenshot on the of the chart, and we can already see that, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic hit here, and we've seen this sharp bounce. This orange line, by the way, is the SMA 200, so it's a simple moving average for the last 200 days in this context, just to give you a rough idea of where the trend currently can be found. And obviously, it's on the long side. You can also see that we've seen an extension here on the upside already before COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we saw a sharp decline. We went down from something like over 300, saw a nearly 50% corrective move. Yeah, it's close. And then we took off from there, and not just took off, but we traded around 180 USD per share, and we topped out. That was already here in July, August last year. We topped out around 600, shortly below that. So in fact, we saw a short push above 600 some days ago, but that was already here, nearly tripling your investment, and the company went to over 300 billion in market cap here, in fact. And again, you have heard it. What I could imagine, if this developments will go through and continue, I think there's a serious chance that Nvidia could probably increase its market cap even further, up to 1 trillion, which means it's nearly tripling from the current levels again. If it's it will be allowed that we will see somehow a spike above 1,000 USD per share in this context, or if it happens, that's certainly something I have to emphasize here, or if we will see some kind of a split similar to Tesla. Well, this is something which needs to be seen, but all in all, we can certainly say that this it's looking promising. And as long as this is definitely something we can already take away from this chart here before we dig deeper into this acquisition now in the following minutes, everything which takes place here above this 200 SMA is certainly a bullish sign. We can consider this a bullish consolidation, probably an accumulation, a trading range which builds here, and rather sooner or later, if we break above 600 USD, further gains seem very likely, especially if there's a certain fundamental catalyst like further monetary policy, or a very dovish rhetoric and continuation of the very dovish way the Fed is currently acting in general, continuing to expand its balance sheet. And in addition to that, there's kind of a fiscal policy which is probably increasing here. Also, the willingness for market participants to invest in high beta stocks in this case, and Nvidia is still a tech company and also a company we can consider a high beta stock. In addition to that, and then we will dig now into the question, who is Nvidia? We also have to make sure that we understand that Nvidia is a very big player in the artificial intelligence world, as we will see in a few seconds. And the thing is that we have to understand that there's currently a really potential war. Not sure if I need to go that hard in my rhetoric here, but I think it's a fair way to put it. At least there's a battle between the U.S. and China in the artificial intelligence space, and probably there will be some let's call it governmental help, or the government, the U.S. government in this case, probably giving Nvidia access to resources and support this company, especially to use its current status here in this context to grow even further and compete with the big players in the Chinese economy here in the AI space. And that's probably also something we have to keep in mind here, and which could potentially drive the share price, respectively the market capitalization of Nvidia, and grow the company even further. This is something we should keep in mind. So first of all, let's have a look here at the question now. Who is Nvidia? So first of all, Nvidia Corporation is an American multinational technology company incorporated in Delaware, based in Santa Clara, California. And the company, this is what's more interesting now, is that it designs graphics processing units, so-called GPUs, for the gaming and professional markets, as well as systems on a chip units, as well as system on a chip units. It's SOCs. Yeah, SOCS, for the mobile computing and automotive market, especially when it comes to the GPU line here. That's something I mentioned already at the beginning, which is labeled GeForce. And if I look down here on my laptop, I can see NVIDIA GeForce GTX. This is the graphic processing unit here I'm using within my laptop. Probably you're watching your screen right now, or at your laptop screen, looking down and see NVIDIA somewhere. This is a direct competition, we can say, with the GPUs of the Radeon brand by AMD. So what's interesting certainly is that already back 20 years ago, and GeForce, respectively Nvidia in this context, and the GPUs which were delivered by AMD were in a dire competition. And me and my friends back then, we were discussing whether which GPU is better. So I'm definitely not an expert, because that was a short period of my life, let's say, once this was of interest, and soon after personal computers and laptops and the developments there weren't the topic anymore, we started to get interested in girls. And so but this is definitely something I remember really well, and that's why Nvidia has been to some extent part of my technological life, if we can call it like that. And now what's even more interesting, I mean, what we will see in the upcoming months then, so we will have certain and several hot topic webinars, and there will be also one on gaming stocks. There's one, probably you remember, the last hot topic webinar we had was on Roblox, the upcoming IPO next week on Wednesday, 10th of March. And also in this context, there are also direct competitors of Roblox, certainly. And we will shine a light on this whole industry, which is currently growing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, due to the fact that people stay at home, that here people don't know what to do with their time. Some trade stocks and crush hedge funds, and some play around, for example, like Roblox is offering their services, but there's also ZNG, so Zynga, for example, but also ATVI. This is what's the name of this company? So ATVI. Okay, it's tradable via the Admiral Markets. That's for sure. And the ticker symbol is ATVI. They are the parent company behind games like Call of Duty and World of Warcraft. Zynga is, for example, the a company behind Farmville, I think, from Facebook. The funny thing is that I know these names, and somewhere I heard about them, but it's not that I'm playing them actively. But if you dig a little deeper into this topic, you will find out that these companies, it's a very hot sector right now. And also Nvidia is in the gaming industry, a well-known company, given their current GPU line, which is labeled GeForce, for example. So you have to see something on your screen, and there's some lots of technology in the background taking place where Nvidia plays a very important role. And in this context here, they have already their place in this industry, but still, in addition to their GPU manufacturing, NVIDIA also provides parallel processing capabilities to researchers and scientists, for example, which are deployed in supercomputing science around the world. More recently, it has also moved into the mobile computing market, where it produces Tegra mobile processors for smartphones and tablets. This is very interesting when it comes to the acquisition of ARMs, as we will see in a few minutes, as well as vehicle navigation and entertainment systems. And again, here, NVIDIA is also now focused on artificial intelligence, AI, well positioned here and about to become a dominant player here too. And so the interesting part about this is now we have to understand that artificial intelligence and everything which has to do with graphics, and therefore just have a look at, even you don't need to know the details what is currently taking place in China, but we know for sure that once you use artificial intelligence, for example, to find out who is I don't know, wearing a mask, let's say, in the or no, not wearing a mask. That's probably a little too bad. But once you see the developments in China taking place with cameras everywhere, scanning the people out there for security reasons, for probably not necessarily only security reasons, but also to spy on them. Well, that's probably a hard word, but definitely something which is probably of striking your mind once you think about this. And therefore, you need these GPUs. You need someone who's an expert on graphics in this case. It's taking place around the world, and NVIDIA is playing a very important role here. And also artificial intelligence in this context plays a very important role. And if we combine all this, you can see where the power of NVIDIA comes from in this context, and why it's already a big player, and with smart acquisitions probably can easily overtake, even if it's, I don't really know whether it's necessary to overtake them, or if NVIDIA can be considered, by the way, there's an I, so this is NVIDIA. it's probably not even necessary that they overtake their competition, which is beside AMD, INTC, so Intel, and the Qualcomm, QCOM. These are also two ways to trade these stocks in this space, by the way. You will see that these play also a role in this SOXX ETF, by the way. And so you can already see Nvidia is a very, very big player in the tech world in general, and well positioned with several developments in certain areas here, which are of high interest in the current developments around the globe. And so now what you probably have seen once you followed the news ticker is that there is a 40 billion acquisition of competitor is the wrong word, but a company which is very, very important in this context when it comes to delivery of software and processors, especially when it comes to smartphones. And why that is, well, first of all, it started in September 2020. So it's probably something like half a year ago that there was an announcement from Nvidia that it plans to buy Arm from SoftBank for 40 billion, a cash on stock transaction, which would be the largest in the history of the semiconductor industry. So it's not the largest acquisition ever, but it's definitely the biggest and the largest in this case in the semiconductor industry. And now the thing is that the reason it wasn't just cheered, but it was more like okay, wait, this is probably big. This is not just big, this is probably too big. And critics have been calling on governments and regulators here to probe the deal ever since. So there have been several lawmakers and developments from a law perspective. So the deal is not yet through. So they announced they plan to do that, but there are several competitors, direct competitors from Nvidia in this context, and also not just from Nvidia, but also from other companies like Apple, like Samsung, for example, who want to not really attack, but at least want to find out whether this is a fair deal, it's a fair acquisition, or it probably is giving too much might, too much power to Nvidia here. And the reason for that is because Arm Ltd is a British company which is specialized in the development and design of several softwares and processors. And Arm's business strategy is based on creating and licensing its technology here as intellectual property, mainly focusing on developing and licensing its ARM processors, the so-called CPUs in this context. So you can already see, okay, every smartphone potentially needs a CPU, a central processing unit. So it's like the engine of the smartphone, if you want. And in this context, that said, ARM is one of the largest players in the market for processors and chips for mobile phones, for tablet computers and smart TVs, something which is also increasingly getting more and more important in our overall life every day. And they have current licenses with, for example, where they handed out their licenses, they sold licenses to companies like Apple, HTC, Nokia, Samsung. Especially Apple, I think it's currently the most valuable company based on market cap. I think they're directly behind or in front of or directly followed by Amazon in this case. And so it already shows how big this deal would be if Nvidia buys, in this case, Arm Ltd, because if this is really happening here, the acquisition of ARMs would give Nvidia a massive positioning in the technology industry when it comes especially to this big impact ARM already has then in the current mobile phone, tablet computer, smart TV area, in fact. So, and that being said, now let's us shine a light here at the developments, let's say, in the semiconductor industry, and why this is of interest and why there's some certain potential be given, even if we have already seen a quite dramatic rise, especially led by companies like Nvidia and the share price here. So because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the demand in the semiconductor industry has fallen at first, shifting towards major semiconductor end markets, such as a PC or a server, for example, wireless and wired communication, consumer electronics, automotive, and industrial applications. But even if we see the semiconductor industry being expected to decline by 5 to 15%, compared to 2019, so the year before. So we have 2020, and now we need the new data, and we compare this data now to 2019, and that was according to a McKinsey report here. One might argue that investing in the space might be not very attractive risk-reward-wise. We have already seen a chart of Nvidia at the beginning of this presentation, seeing where potentially pointing to a top out, which is currently taking place at an elevated level, but still topping out, or let's say at least consolidating. But the thing is that if we now look at this ARM acquisition, at this ARM deal here, Nvidia targets to become the, in fact, premier computing company for the age of artificial intelligence, accelerating innovation while expanding into large, high growth markets. So continue to grow, in fact, and position itself really, really well. And high growth in this context here is, I mean, it's a big topic, and it needs to see the deal going through. But if it goes through, and if Nvidia is successful here, and regulators and governments around the globe give their okay, whatever might go on in the background, then Nvidia would gain, in fact, the ability to own the whole chip stack across mobile phones, computers, and cloud computing data centers, which is massive. And potentially, even if you've now already seen that the stock has dramatically risen over the course of the last months here, over the last 12 months, in fact, nearly tripling its price, that even this could be considered undervalued. And what I did now is I used the same chart, zoomed out a little, and now what I did is what I want to do in this context is I want to give you here a first sign which clearly points to this trend being broken. That was already, could be seen already last year in September. So when this deal was announced, we have already seen a dramatic rise in the stock price. And then from this, it wasn't really a parabolic move. So compared to the rise we've seen in the EV sector, for example, electric vehicle sector, Tesla, NIO, in this context. But by the way, also something we want to shine a light on in a later webinar here, hot topic webinar. But we not just topped out, but we broke here this sharp rising trend line here. That was, again, that was at the beginning of October or something like that. And from there, we now see the company, or the stock in this case of the company, it's not really topping out, but you can see a clear consolidation which is taking place here. And this could, in fact, take some while until we see the next move higher. In fact, here, the break higher that was at the beginning of this year, this push shortly above 600 USD per share, that was, in fact, I have to say, I mean, it really wasn't like I was convinced that this is the final breakthrough, but it's probably too early, especially in the current market environment. We have also to consider the fact that the overall developments in financial markets and equity markets in general, it looks like a little overheated, let's say, and without the support, especially from central banks, and continued support, especially giving the outlook that they continue to support the economy, even if we get to see now a vaccination of broader parts of the society here against COVID-19 in this case, and then returning to a society normal, but also to an economic normal, but still continue to deliver more liquidity in this context. This is something which still needs to be clearly formulated. And in this context, we can now see, for example, and this is also one of the reasons, for example, why we have seen some, let's say, elevated volatility and no real follow through on the upside, probably after this initial push above this or out of this range. But you've probably seen the developments in US yields here, and US yields rising sharply on the upside and pushing as high as 1.6%. Last week on, I think it was Thursday, there was it's a hard word, but catastrophic 7-year bond auction probably is giving quite a good picture of what happened there. And this auction, not to go into the technical details behind this, but we could also call it like, this is like if you look at the auction itself and what happened there and how low, let's say, the demand for 7-year US bonds was, this is like, you could say, this is how it looks if US bonds are considered radioactive and no one wants to have them. So it sounds very aggressive, but still it perfectly illustrates what's going on there. So it's not that the central bankers are currently speaking really the truth if they say something like, well, we consider the overall economy to be strong and be on the recovery part, let's say, after COVID, after lockdown. But it's more like that currently the, let's call it the debt problem and the massive stimulus which took place, not just from the central banks, but also from the government and from a fiscal perspective here, that this is resulting in a skepticism if the US dollar should be still considered the world reserve currency #1. So this being said, gives you a perfect idea of why there is no such strong demand then for US bonds as we've already seen last week. So it's not that yields rise because the economy is expected to grow faster and after we return to a normal, after most parts of the society are vaccinated, but it's more like that people are kind of skeptical whether this craziness from a monetary perspective and from a central bank perspective, but also from a fiscal perspective, fiscal policy perspective, is sustainable, in fact. And that's one of the reasons why I probably step back. And the result, if you do not have a strong demand for bonds in this context, is that yields continue or yields rise. And in this environment, growth stocks, especially companies which have seen such a sharp rise as in this context Nvidia has, this is a development which is short-term at least negative. I think that longer term, we should expect the central bank to deliver support, as will the government deliver fiscal stimulus in this context. And this is an overall, again, positive environment in which especially tech stocks, in this case, growth title like Nvidia, will perform really well. But it could be that before we get to see such a sharp rise and probably see, again, stronger demand against this region here around 500 USD, probably 480 to 500 here, a level which is currently being tested, by the way. So we're about, that's something like 10% further downside here in growth title. But if we do not see demand against this region, and we can also not stabilize here above 470, 450, this is the lower green line, then a deeper corrective move as low as 300 USD per share could be seen. This is especially true if in addition to rising yields, we see, let's call it a spillover, which results in deleveraging then on a broader scale, where tech title, in this case growth title, will naturally be aggressively sold. And if volatility increases, if this happens and we see a deeper pull-in, then I could imagine the stock see again 300 USD, which is from the current levels, nearly a drop of 40%. But risk reward wise, given all the aspects I presented in the earlier minutes of this presentation, this is then probably very interesting here. And again, against 300 USD per share, to consider the long side to be attractive, in fact. So yeah, so that's it from the Nvidia perspective, and only looking at this stock in this context. Now what we want to do is we want to have a look at a more diversified way to invest in the semiconductor sector in this context. So what we have here is the iShares PHLX Semiconductor ETF. In case of this case here, a CFD, it's hashtag SOXX. Once you look here on the website from Admiral Markets. And what I have here is the top 10 holdings of this ETF to just give you an idea of who are the bigger players in this context. And we have Nvidia here. So you can see that Nvidia is in fact not the biggest company, and this is by the way from a German website. It's the German website, I just see. Okay, so there's percentage-wise, based on the weight it has within the ETF, it's 7%. But it's not just only 7%, but compared to Intel has a slight higher weight here with 8.38, and also Qualcomm has 7.83, so slightly higher than that. But this could turn if there's an increased demand for Nvidia, given this current Arm acquisition, and in this context, a rising market capitalization of the company. So then also here, Nvidia could see a boost up to the top of this top 10 holding list. In fact, you also see other companies here in this context. For example, Micron, MU in this context, also quite a big player. Texas Instruments, you have Broadcom here. So these are all stocks which can be considered high beta and are potentially highly positively correlated to each other. And that said, by the way, so beside the fact that this is a very hot sector right now, and definitely something to consider for your long-term investments. Also consider if you, for example, look at how to trade earnings. You probably recall the Netflix webinar we had several weeks ago, and there I presented an idea as checklist you can go through and then attack earnings and earnings releases and how to trade them actively. And I presented to you a trade I recently did in Netflix in this context. And there's also other ways to formulate trading strategies around earnings releases. So what you have here is great as a great way to see which companies are the big players in one sector. And since they do not release their earnings at the same time, it means that you could now look at the earnings release and the developments in one special stock then, and then use this development and look at another stock. And once you see that the stock here again releases, for example, a strong release, sees an initial push into the open on the upside and then sells off, for example, and this happens twice in a row, you could say, well, this is kind of a pattern. And why is this of interest? Well, you have now two observations. You made two observations in two different stocks, but they are positively correlated to each other. If now one other player out of the semiconductor area here is then, or you can do this for every other area, in fact, not semiconductors only, but also other areas. If you now have a third stock releasing their earnings report, let's say after hours, and you see that the numbers are strong, you see the initial push into the open, but you remember that the earlier two did the same, so saw the push higher. This is probably then an idea to, for example, short the stock or put it the other way around. So currently I have to say that I prefer to play the long side, but this is just how you could use such information beside, from a pure trading perspective here, beside the idea to invest in this area here from a longer perspective. And this already brings us, in fact, to the summary of today's hot topic webinar. By the way, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat box. Also, this is true for all of you watching this now, the recording on YouTube. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat box below the video. I'd be more than happy to answer them. If you have questions and you say, well, I don't want to post on YouTube because I don't have an account there or whatever, well, then send over the email to Admiral Markets and they will forward it to me. If you have questions right now, feel free to ask them here. Oh yeah, that's an interesting question. This is an easy one, in fact, to answer. Let me just see. Can I here? So we can have a look here. The question is how to invest here into SOXX in this case, so and into the ETF. So therefore, head over to admiralmarkets.com, and then what you can see is that you have here the top start trading. This is very important because we now, first of all, want to check out the account types. As far as I know, Nvidia is one of the growth companies. Let me just check this here. Paying a dividend, but I have to check this first. Let me just see, please. Yes. So they're paying dividends. Oh, well, let's see. That at least they did in the past on the last releases. Let me just check here. So last time they paid a dividend was 16 cents. That was for Q3 20. And before that, 16. So last year it was 16 cents. So it's likely that they will now pay a dividend too. So 16 cents in this case per share. It's a small dividend compared. I mean, we look at a stock here in this context. we look here in this context, we look at a $500 share. So 16 cents is not that much per share, but it's in fact not usual, not common that growth companies pay a dividend, in fact. So at least the big players like Amazon, for example, Amazon is not paying a dividend if I'm not mistaken. So that's a very great question, by the way. So, but in case of Nvidia, they are paying a dividend. So here is the account size, trading account type page. And so in case of SOXX here, you can see, I think it depends on what account type you have, because you say that you use the MT5 platform, but you do not find SOXX. So the thing is, if you have a 0 MT5, you can see here that the access, to CFDs is limited. So compared to trade MT5, this is where, let's call it, the spread is included. Once you trade FX, for example, you can see here that you have also ETF CFDs over 300. If you plan, by the way, to buy it physically via a stock exchange and not via a derivative in this context, then you have to go with the Invest MT5 solution. But now this is the different MT5 types. So if you want to invest long-term and without a leverage and only from the long side, then you have to go here with the Invest MT5 solution. If you want to trade, then trade MT5, obviously. And if you go with the 0 MT5 solution, for example, 0 MT5 means that in case of, for example, cash index CFDs, like the DAX, for example, you're paying only a 0.2 point spread and pay a commission on top of that, which is very interesting for short-term traders, especially scalpers in this context. But if you now go here to products and go to ETFs, then, by the way, I currently sometimes look over here to my third screen. That has the reason, because the US markets just opened and I just want to make sure that I'm not missing the action here in the first minutes of trading. And now we click on show all ETF CFDs. And hopefully it opens here. And then you can enter the symbol and you will see SOXX. Here it's the iShares PHLX Semiconductor ETF. So it's most likely that you have the 0 MT5 solution. So that's one of the reasons why you can't find it within your MT5. So you have to open a trade MT5 account then to find it then, in fact. And I hope that this answers the question. So let's go back to the summary in this context. So first of all, Nvidia Corporation is an American, it's an American multinational technology company designing graphics processing units, GPUs, system on a chip units, SOCS, for the mobile computing and automotive market, provides parallel processing capabilities to researchers and scientists, which are deployed in supercomputing sites around the world, and recently also moved into the mobile computing market, where it produces Tegra mobile processors for smart tablets, as well as vehicle navigation and entertainment systems, and now is also focused on artificial intelligence. So AI, big field. In fact, it's well positioned there and about to become a dominant player here. So all in all, Nvidia is likely to stay for another decade and more than that. And what's now very interesting, and what was the main topic of today's webinar, was here that Nvidia plans to acquire Arm for 40 billion USD, which would give Nvidia a massive positioning in the technology industry, since Arm is one of the largest players in the market for processors and chips for mobile phones, tablet computers, with current licenses of Arm CPUs, including Apple, HTC, Nokia, and Samsung. So, and the ways to invest in Nvidia, or in general in the semiconductor industry, is via buying Nvidia stock in this case, or selling, depends on whether you want to go long or short, and also in a more diversified way than via the ETF. I presented to you the iShares PHLX Semiconductor ETF, or in short, it's SOXX, SOXX in this case. So, and that's it. That's it on a very hot topic right now. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. So don't forget to join us next time. Today I'm sorry, by the way, this is not Monday, but today is Wednesday. That's the wrong day. Friday. So there we go. So on Friday, the 5th of March. So Paul will talk here about so-called day trading patterns, also something which is of high interest, certainly for active traders then. And what he wants to do here is he will look at certain patterns that can help us day trade. This is one question he will answer here. We will also answer the question on what we should focus on when trading here on a daily basis, day trading patterns. That means on an intraday basis, what to focus on. And then also, how can we use them in our own trading, how to adapt the knowledge which Paul provides here in your own trading. 2 p.m. London. If you're interested in this webinar, I highly recommend checking out admiralmarkets.com, the tab education, and then under webinars, you find the trading spotlight here. Register there. It's for free. You get the link directly to your inbox. If you're already registered for the Trading Spotlight webinar series, don't mind, you will get the invitation directly to the inbox because it's an ongoing and recurring webinar series, in this case, Trading Spotlight. And here are the contact details from Admiral Markets. For further information, feel free to send an email, check out the website, admiralmarkets.com. And here, the risk disclaimer at the end of this webinar. I wish you all the best. Happy trading. Watch your stops. Talk to you again next week. I look forward to it.